Down a skater, it was no issue for the Florida Panthers as they controlled play on Saturday. We saw another bobbery on Saturday, and contract negotiations between the Florida Panthers and Sam Bennett have begun.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, October 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at Monoman12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at @LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. So Florida Panther fans, grateful to be back here once again on the show to discuss everything in the world of the Florida Panthers as the Cats just keep chugging along and just keep their winning ways, and doing so on Saturday night against the Vegas Golden Knights, a rematch of the 2023 Stanley Cup Final. The Florida Panthers were dealing with their fair share of injuries, only going with 17 skaters, and one of the skaters being a defenseman being on the forward lines. Hey, but even the Vegas Golden Knights were also down a player with William Karlsson not playing, but still the Florida Panthers were controlling play and found a way to win. And every single time the Vegas Golden Knights punched, the Panthers had a counter punch on Saturday night and finding a way with a 4-3 win in overtime. And here to join me to break down that game and more in the world of the Florida Panthers, where we also saw a great save by Sergei Bobrovsky, which we'll talk more at length here on the show, and also the contract negotiations between the Florida Panthers and Sam Bennett. He is Colby Guy of the pucksandpalms.com, the Pucks and Palms podcast. So, Colby, welcome back to the show, my friend.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, great. It's going well. Grateful to have you back on here, and we are recording. This will be released after Game 6 of the NLCS tonight. So, want to say best of luck to your New York Mets right before they first pitch happens, which we are 40 minutes away from that. So, let's get to the hockey here for the show. And the Florida Panthers come out with this 4-3 win. Like I said, down a skater and found a way to counterpunch every single time. But and here's the thing that of my impression of just watching the game is, especially after the first period where the Panthers were just placing chance after chance, and then unfortunately the Vegas Golden Knights score on a mistake by Anton Lundell, a rare mistake by him. He almost gave the Golden Knights actually another goal later in the game. But even after that first period, Kobe, I felt like that the Panthers, the fact that there was no sense in panic. And if you were to just not even look at the box score or even look at the roster, you would not have ever guessed that they were down a skater.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that jumped out to me was the way they started the third period, where they came out guns a-blazing, even though you had a team that was playing 7 games in 11 nights, a team that was playing with 10 forwards for a good chunk of that, and now down another forward there. It gets pretty dire in those situations. So you go in there, you outshoot them. I think it was 6-0 to start that period. They get the one break off the turnover where Brett Howden comes in, scores on the breakaway to give Vegas the lead. After that moment, they didn't stop pushing. I think that's where you really kind of saw the character of this team, the character of all the guys they have out there, playing without guys like Matthew Tkachuk, Alexander Barkov, the penalty kill making do without Alexander Barkov and Thomas Nosek, who was supposed to be a really big part of that penalty kill. So you have guys that clearly know how to win no matter the circumstances. And then, of course, third period there, just over 7 minutes to go, you have that one line that's been carrying the water for the Panthers pretty much coming through there, with Ekblad getting a shot on net and Reinhart knocking that over to Eetu Luostarinen for the go-ahead goal. And a lot of that just speaks to the way that they kept pushing, kept going for those second chance opportunities. And that was pretty much the theme of the game there. And that's how they kind of stole those 2 points there.
Yeah, and for the Panthers here, I mean, Carter Verhaeghe almost had 20 shot attempts. There were 6 players that had 5 shots on goal or more in this one. And although the Panthers lost the faceoff battle in the game, I mean, you saw how many key faceoffs. I mean, you spoke to the one on Etu where Sam Reinhart, as soon as that draw happens, he's going to the net and he's getting behind the defense to get that tap. And also Lundell has been great in recent games. I mean, being over 60% in the last 4. I mean, and the point streak happened for him is at 4, I believe, for him. And also there was a stat that Script Sports showed that right, the recent game for Anton Lundell was the fastest he has gone to 4 goals in his career. In a season for him. So also the maturity and the growth for him. And like I mentioned, Carter Verhaeghe, the 20 shot attempts, he hasn't even gotten on the score sheet yet as far as goals. Mackie Semiskevich with multiple breakaway opportunities. I mean, you see how much his teammates are helping him. And there was one back check that Jesper Boquist a breakaway where you see how much deception he's showing with. You think he's going for a shot, and then before you know it, he's going around for a wraparound. And we also saw that on Thursday against Vancouver. So you're seeing so many guys stepping up. AJ Greer, although he had a turnover that went for a goal for the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, how much him and Boquist are helping the youngster is also speaking volumes to how much this Panthers team is pushing through.
I think the most encouraging thing that came out of that game was Anton Lundell. And like you said earlier in the show, he had a couple of turnovers that one led to a Vegas goal. The other one came close to leading to a Vegas goal. But he's at the point of his career where he's able to kind of put that past him and get right on to the next shift and making a big impact. And he goes out there and gets a few big points and makes a few big plays that lead to goals in the other end. So I think that kind of maturation for Anton Lundell, being able to put those rare mistakes behind them and not really let those mistakes kind of dwell for the rest of the game, and he kind of shrinks because of it, and he's not willing to make as much risks because of it. So no, he went out there the next shift and he makes a big play to score a goal. And
Yeah.
he came out with a couple of assists there, and he really helped the team win.
Yeah, and just the overall maturity of doing this once again at 23 years old, just always very reliable, even in these injury situations for the Florida Panthers, and just how they're just able to just be reliant on such a youngster for them, and still pushing through once again. But we're going to transition over to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about a save that happened in this game, and also discuss more about some of the numbers for the Panthers and the shot volumes that they're putting on goal throughout this season. We're going to discuss that and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. And when you need to hire, you need Indeed. And Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work and use Indeed for screening and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality of matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. And you could join over more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now to support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Segment number 2 here on this Monday, October 21st edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday, here with Colby Guy of pucksandpalms.com and the Pucks and Palms podcast here on the show, joining me today to discuss more about Saturday's win for the Florida Panthers and more. And Colby, we saw another highlight reel save on Saturday with Sergei Bobrovsky, and just how he's able to do this, not necessarily over and over again, because he's usually calm in net. You don't see him sprawling, but so I guess over and over again is the wrong use of the word. But whenever it comes to that highlight reel save, we're talking the biggest highlight reel one, obviously with Game 2 of the first round against the Tampa Bay Lightning, but this one for Sergei Bobrovsky, the one we're talking about, is Cole Schwint trying to go for a backhand, and then you see an open net, and then Bobrovsky able to close it in, and also for the Panthers able to their defenseman able to close in for Bob to not allow them a second chance opportunity. When you saw that play, what were you thinking when you saw it?
I was just confused as to how the puck didn't go in, and then the sequence just kept going. I'm like, what's going on here? And then finally, Adam Boquist put a lid on it by stuffing that wraparound chance there. And Aaron Ekblad had something similar later, so he deserves another bit of flowers for another wraparound stop. But really, I mean, Sergei Bobrovsky just made a handful, not even just one, just a handful of really good saves. And then he had Adam Boquist there to back him up once those scoring chances finally became a little bit too much.
Yeah, the first one, Adam Boquist stopped it on, I believe it was Nick Hague who had the wraparound attempt, and then the second one for the Vegas Golden Knight was Brisson was a little bit of a drive to the net, and also with Bobrovsky trying to do a sweep a little bit there. And I mean, it's funny because when we were discussing more about our duds of the game on Thursday, I was mostly disappointed in the performances of Adam Boquist and Nate Schmidt in that one, but also Aaron Ekblad in this one, 7 block shots for him, and just for him, just consistently for the Panthers, able to clog things in their own zone, eliminate the speed for Vegas. I mean, we knew coming in how much the Eichel Barbashev Stone line was going for them going into in the beginning of the season, but for Florida to just counter with everything, and also protect the house. I mean, Sergei Bobrovsky, it's just incredible continuing what he does in order to make these saves. But also, I want to discuss more about how the Panthers are doing it at. Actually, before I get there, this game reminded me just the flow of it, not necessarily the game score, but just the flow of it. Reminded me of February 24th, 2024, Panthers versus Capitals, especially in overtime, with everything was just back and forth, not a lot of neutral zone regroups for the Panthers. And also what both games had was a game winner from Gustav Forsling, a great give and go, and a return feed from Bennett to Gus into an open net. And also in that game against the Washington Capitals, Sam Bennett also had the primary assist. So that's another thing that of the similarities of one game in one season to the other. And just Gustav Forsling, you wonder when he's driving into the Vegas zone, just about how much respect there might have been for him there, but also the way he skates and gains the zone. I mean, you would mistake him for a forward gaining of how he enters through the zone.
Yeah, I mean, he has a lot of speed there. He has some offensive skill that not a lot of people give him credit for because he invests a lot in the defensive end. And I mean, part of it was reading the play pretty well, reading the clock pretty well because there was only 16 seconds left there. And he found the spot, he got the puck in the right spot, and he was able to put it into the open net there. So just smart play, taking advantage of the legs there to fill the space, and big goal there for Force.
Yeah, and so going back to the Panthers and their and how they're doing this with shot volume, which the Panthers had in at least in most recent games, there's a big discrepancy in shot attempts versus actual shots getting on net. But the Panthers were able to get more of them on goal in on Saturday's game. But for what the Panthers, now that we have almost 10 games in, now I'm in the position to read more of stats and looking more of them to see how they compare, because now numbers aren't as skewed as they would be in one or two games. But the Panthers on their defensive end, as far as shot attempts blocked by teammates, they're second least in the NHL behind New Jersey. But on the other end of things, the Panthers are top 3 in shots unblocked, top 4 in shots blocked. But however, they're fourth in rebound shots for. So they're getting their second chances opportunities, second in shots on goal total, and only 4 behind New Jersey. And New Jersey has played one more game than the Panthers there. So might as well put the Panthers as the best as far as shots on goal per game. But it just really goes to show about how the Panthers are just winning their battles, getting low to high, throwing something on net, even if it does get blocked. A puck can bounce, and then it could be, and then the defense for the other side can try to maybe poke the puck out, get reset. But then if they miss, that could create something open to create an even better lane for the Panthers. So the numbers are really truly showing. What do you think whenever you hear that?
I mean, I've just been paying attention to some individual guys like an Anton Lundell, who over the past few games has really shown to be a bit smarter about time and space and creating space for himself, like he did on his goal against the Canucks on Tuesday, where he drove in. He saw that the two defenders were driving over towards the slot where Sam Reinhart was. So he was able to drive in, take an angle at the face-off dot where he was able to get a good angle at that open top shelf and rifle it in. But even as far as just creating his shots like that, his personal shot through percentage is up like 6 or 7% from last year, maybe even more than that. And partially it's because he's creating more space for himself and he's driving play a little bit more rather than taking a shot from the perimeter at the net. He's creating that space for himself and driving it in. And you kind of see other guys that are capable of doing that too. Like AJ Greer does that sometimes too. He's a guy that's able to drive to the net, and he's a good enough passer too. But I mean, some of it is a smaller sample size too, because I mean, I don't really gauge numbers and especially team stats until we get to game 15 or 20.
Okay,
and we're at
fair enough.
game 7 right now, game 8. One of those two numbers, game 7 or 8. So, I mean, there's probably some margin of error here in the sample size, but I mean, just watching individual guys, and obviously with Alexander Barkov out and the forward group kind of thin, your eyes typically go to Anton Lundell here because he's the one that has to drive play in those big minutes. And personally, I think he's done a really good job of handling that and maturing his game to a place where he's able to do that.
Yeah, and for this team, having to do that up and down in the middle, where even with and thankfully for the Panthers, I mean, it's not a situation where you're having a you're having multiple injuries to guys who are centers. You only have one, although it's your best player for them. It's not consistently one person shifting from wing to center and then having to, even though guys have been double shifting in these last few games. I mean, that especially on Saturday's game, due to the salary cap with being down a skater, the Panthers are still able to go through the middle, gain, dump and chase, and still win their fair share of battles. And I mean, even for them, their PIM differential, this doesn't account for fighting majors. I wish they had a stat that separated both minor penalties and majors. But the Panthers are ninth best in differential, so they're getting their chances on. They're getting multiple chances on the power play. Their penalty kill is almost at 90%, and you spoke about that earlier without Alexander Barkov. You see the guys like Jesper Boquist stepping up, AJ Greer stepping up, Etsu Luosterainen, who got the third goal of the game for the Panthers. I mean, 4 of 21 on the power play, and you don't have your full guys in this. And also Sam Bennett, another power play goal for the Cats here. So it's being done on multiple ends for them. And I mean, how they're able to, and 2 of their goals came from backdoor. So that's also a way of using your peripherals to wisely. So that's also just about hockey IQ for these guys on what they're doing when the puck is in the offensive zone, when they're going it with speed. So that the Panthers have definitely been using that to their benefit throughout so far in this young season. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we saw a report after the game about a possible contract extension, but negotiations have begun for one of their centers. So we're going to discuss that more next here with myself and Colby Guy here on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Once again, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. And you could do that all at FanDuel.com. And once again, I'd like to thank you guys for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday, here with Colby Guy of pucksandpalms.com and the Pucks and Palms podcast joining me on the show. And Colby, after the game, after the Panthers got this win, we've seen some surprises so far in this young season. After opening night, there was Bill Zito and Carter Verhaeghe coming in to officially announce the extension between the Panthers and Swaggy, and Elliotte Friedman reporting that the contract negotiations between the Florida Panthers and Sam Bennett have begun. And this is Bill Zito doing his due diligence as the GM of the Panthers and just thinking about the future and thinking about the now for the team. And I've had a little bit of pushback on the page on YouTube here and there about the contract extensions of Bennett and who you prioritize more over who. But also, I think about this. I have this question in my head. I think about how many extensions might be too much for the team, but at the same time, I think about this. Fix your do what you need to do now to continue winning and solve everything later. Where do you fall on what side of the coin do you fall on here?
I mean, when you get so many guys to commit to team-friendly deals, like You have Sam Reinhart playing at an $8 million AAV when he could have gotten like $11 million elsewhere.
No doubt.
You have Carter Verhaeghe taking a hair over. You have Carter Verhaeghe taking $7 million when he probably could be making 9.5 somewhere else. You have Gustav Forsling making about like less than 5.5 when he's a guy that probably could be making 8. So you have all these guys buying in, taking lower AAVs to stay. Why not take advantage of it? Why not
Mhm.
lock down your Stanley Cup winning team? All these really good players, if they want to stay and they want to take the money that it takes to stay to be able to keep everyone together, I don't see why not. And it's not like any of these guys are in their mid to like mid 30s, early 30s. A lot of these guys are in their mid 20s to late 20s. And once these contracts expire, they're going to be like 35, 36. So really, you're not going to be eating that for too long. And by the time you get to the end of it, the salary caps probably have gone up enough to deal with it anyways. So if Sam Bennett falls into the camp where he's getting $2 or $3 million less than you expect him to, I don't see why not bring him back. And this is a guy the team loves having around. I mean, you saw Vinny Viola call the guy the heart and soul of the team, and he's not the first person to call Sam Bennett that. I mean, he's a guy that gets into it during the playoffs. He's a guy that drives that physical play. That second line has been really good, and a lot of it is because of the synergy that Matthew Tkachuk has with Sam Bennett. So, I mean, if you're able to get him on a reasonable number, I wouldn't be opposed to it. The one thing I would say is that a player who plays the game the style that Sam Bennett has played his games ages worse than what I'd say a Carter Verhaeghe or a Gustav Forsling would age. So I'd be wary on how long the contract would be. But
Mhm.
if you really love the guy and you're really committed to the guy, your window is still going to be 5 or 6 more years of this team when you have all those guys together. Maybe you eat it for the other 2 or 3 years that you'd be paying him. So really, I don't see why not. And when you're looking at the way the team is constructed right now, you have a pretty solid nucleus of a team locked up for the next 5 years that, like I said, won the Stanley Cup. I don't see why you don't keep it together.
Yeah, and when you think of all these guys who are taken below market value, eventually adds up to one extra player that you're willing to put that money of whatever Sam Bennett might be worth, of whether it's a 6 or 7 million per year. So it's all adding up, and I think it's a way of just also it's not just I want to be on this team, but it's also thinking about looking out after your other guys that you want to keep around. So I think it's pretty unselfish for uh, these guys to just say yes to what they have here. Yes, there's the tax situation, that there's that argument and that side of things, but when you also have when you also for this franchise, there's a little bit of maybe possible promise in what's coming up with maybe someone like a Sandis Vilmanis who's now in Charlotte for a little bit. Justin Sordiff is still a question mark for how he's going to impact in the future. Mackie Semiskevich, his deal is going to be up very soon. Chances are he does get a bridge for the Panthers here. And the thing is, I know a lot of goalies have been paid recently. Sorokin, Ottinger, Swayman, Olmark. So the Panthers' next goalie deal, I don't think it's going to be 10 million. That's the thing. So that space opened up is also in a position for another player that could possibly have them all fit together. And like you said, this 5 or 6 year window. I mean, in the last 14 years, we've had 4 teams win multiple cups. So you're thinking in this of what you're able what you that the fact that there's still so much juice to squeeze out of this. And I think you're not going to be pressing it really, really hard. You're just going to slowly be squeezing it. And I think that the Panthers in this situation, short term, signing Sam Bennett, the identity, the physicality, but like you said, the injuries. That's really the really big question mark of why I've been a little bit vocal about maybe uh, of what that could look like. So that's really the only question I have in the back of my head. But hey, uh, it would be a big void if he does if he does walk. That would be that it would take a while. It would set them back a little bit, at least like not necessarily. I'm not saying like multiple years, but it would take a huge adjustment period, where things will at least be a little bit tight for at least one more year after this.
Yeah, like looking at the way the cap sheet was going into next year, if you saw Carter Verhaeghe take $9 million, like you probably would have expected him to do, it gets a little bit harder to imagine Sam Bennett coming back. And now it seems like they have enough space to do that and be able to operate and bring some of these guys they like back. So I think it speaks to a lot to the deal that Carter Verhaeghe took. Also, looking at what Sam Reinhart took, that left a lot of money for the Panthers to be able to operate in this situation. And then once you get to the end of Sergei Bobrovsky's contract, when his career is winding down, that number's going down. And I don't think what you get between Spencer Knight and a older Sergei Bobrovsky, or whatever backup option they want to go with if Sergei Bobrovsky does retire after this contract, or if Sergei Bobrovsky moves on and goes somewhere else, if the Panthers want to run with Spencer Knight in 2 years as their starting goaltender, that's not going to add up to $14 million.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it ends up adding up to, it's not going to add up to 14. So they're going to be able to have room to move and operate and be able to build a good team. And in 3 years, the Panthers are probably going to be a pretty good team because they have so many guys locked up to pretty long, pretty reasonable deals. So, I mean, even if they're locking this many guys up, they're going to have some room to be flexible.
Yeah, and thankfully for the Panthers, you have options of whether to qualify an offer for Adam Boquist if things do work out, if things are on the cheap to if you have to rebuild that side of the puck, if they extend Bennett, that means chances are they move on from Ekblad unless he takes a significant cut for him. Nico Mikkola is under contract, which has turned out to be such a great deal, especially on the term for them on that side of the ice. So that's another thing for the Panthers on just how they consistently have options. That's the thing that's really Bill Zito and just his ability to just look at the now and the future for them. So lots of things still to get done before anything is offered and anything is signed on a dotted line for a possible Sam Bennett extension, which I'm not fully against. But it's still we're doing our jobs and asking these questions on everything for the future of the team. But Colby, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We're getting you out on time, just in time for first pitch between the Mets and the Dodgers. Once again, this will be released after the game. But best of luck to you and your team. But tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Colby Guy, and then you can find my work at pucksandpalms.com. And I occasionally freelance other places, but when I do it, you will see that on my Twitter at Colby Guy.
Awesome, my friend. Thank you so much, and I'll see you very soon, and hope to get you back on the podcast soon as well. So thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
And if you like what you're hearing, Please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Colby Guy, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.